He flew on private jets. He carried a diplomatic royal passport. He held the keys to the world's most exclusive central banks. But there was one terrifying secret. His royal title was a complete lie. By the time the banks realized they'd been fooled, he had already walked away with over $3 billion. This is the jaw-dropping story of the fake prince who pulled off the ultimate financial heist, and the single, simple mistake that brought his entire multi-billion-dollar empire crashing down. Who was he? To the world, he did not exist. He had no digital footprint, no social media, no public records. He was a ghost, a blank slate. But he understood a fundamental truth about human nature. People do not look at faces, they look at symbols. If you dress like a king, people will treat you like one. If you speak with absolute authority, people will assume you have it. He chose his target carefully. He would not scam ordinary citizens. He would not target local businesses. He went after the gatekeepers of global wealth, the central banks. He knew that if he could deceive them, he would not just steal millions, but billions. He understood that the grand halls of international finance were not guarded by complex algorithms, but by fallible humans who were highly susceptible to the intoxicating allure of royalty, prestige, and staggering wealth. He spent years studying the exact behavioral patterns of ultra-high net worth individuals, mastering their vocabulary, their subtle gestures, their posture, and their complete lack of hesitation. He realized that the truly wealthy never ask for permission. They simply assume the world is already theirs. By adopting this exact psychological posture, he transformed himself from an absolute nobody into a modern financial deity. In 2022, he arrived in Switzerland. He checked into a 5-star suite under the name Prince Khalid. He claimed to be an elite royal envoy, managing an off-ledger sovereign wealth fund. To prove it, he didn't show a passport. He showed something far more powerful. He showed an illusion. How do you convince a room full of Harvard-educated risk analysts to give you billions of dollars? You play on their deepest flaw: greed. The prince presented a secret investment portfolio. He claimed his country was quietly offloading massive reserves of gold and sovereign bonds to fund a highly classified, off-the-books infrastructure project. He spoke in a low, measured tone, dropping names of international ministers and global power players with absolute, careless ease. He acted as though their meeting was a mere formality, a tiny step in a transaction of truly monumental proportions. He deliberately arrived late to the meetings, wore unbranded but flawlessly tailored suits, and looked at his phone with quiet boredom while senior vice presidents presented their proposals. This brilliant projection of supreme indifference made the bankers crave his approval even more. He presented documents, beautifully forged diplomatic credentials, bank guarantees with perfect watermarks. But his real weapon was exclusivity. He told the bankers they had 48 hours to secure the deal. If they hesitated, he would take the billions to their rivals in London. He made them feel like they were the chosen ones, the privileged few who were being handed a direct ticket to generational wealth. The pressure inside that boardroom was intense. The bankers faced a choice: run a deep background check and risk losing the deal of a lifetime, or sign the paperwork and secure a massive 9-figure commission. They chose the commission. They signed the papers. They wanted to believe the lie so badly that they actively ignored every red flag that stood right in front of them. They ignored the lack of formal diplomatic registration, the unusual routing requests, and the highly unorthodox speed of the transaction. The psychological trap was completely sprung, and the jaws of the con had shut tight around them. The first transfer was $80 million. It landed in a shell company account in Zurich. Within 3 minutes, the account was empty. The money had already been split into 12 different streams, routing through shell corporations in Panama, Cyprus, and the Cayman Islands. The illusion worked. The prince was now a very wealthy man, but 80 million was just the test run. It was merely the proof of concept that he needed to show his methods were flawless. He now had the capital, the confidence, and the infrastructure to scale his operation beyond anything the financial world had ever seen. He had proved that the system was incredibly vulnerable to a masterclass in social engineering. With $80 million in startup capital, the fake prince scaled his operation to an industrial level. He didn't just want to steal money anymore. He wanted to build an alternative financial universe. He created his own private investment firm, staffed entirely with highly paid associates. The crazy part? None of them knew they were working for a con artist. He hired top-tier lawyers, prestigious accountants, and brilliant marketing executives, paying them double the market rate. they built a towering facade of legitimacy. He operated out of high-end glass towers in major financial capitals, utilizing their legitimate credentials to shield his illegitimate operations. He began targeting national treasury departments of smaller, struggling countries. He offered central banks in developing nations massive, low-interest loans for national development. The catch was simple. The countries had to deposit a 20% cash reserve into his sovereign fund to secure the funding. It was a classic advance fee scheme, but he was playing it on a global, geopolitical scale. One by one, cash-strapped nations fell for the trap. They deposited their national reserves into his accounts, desperate for the promised infrastructure loans that would save their economies. But those loans never arrived. Instead, the money vanished into a black hole of offshore structures. By mid-2024, the fake prince had accumulated over $3 billion. He had successfully swindled the very institutions designed to protect the global economy. He was untouchable. He had purchased private islands in the South Pacific, turning them into self-sustaining sanctuaries equipped with state-of-the-art satellite arrays and private security forces. He had secured diplomatic immunity from a small, corrupt island nation, effectively placing himself above the reach of international law enforcement. He was no longer just pretending to be a prince. He had the wealth, the leverage, and the power of an actual monarch. He lived in a world where every whim was answered, every door was opened, and every official could be bought with a fraction of his stolen wealth. He threw lavish parties attended by unsuspecting celebrities and political figures, further cementing his absolute legitimacy in the eyes of the public. But in the world of high-stakes crime, the bigger you get, the harder it is to stay invisible. The sheer volume of wealth he controlled was beginning to create massive ripples in the global financial system. How do you hide $3 billion? You don't put it in a vault, you turn it into code. The prince began converting his stolen fiat currency into privacy-focused cryptocurrencies. He used advanced atomic swaps, which bypassed every major exchange on Earth. He literally dissolved the money into the digital ether, moving it through thousands of automated, decentralized smart contracts that executed at all hours of the day and night. To the central banks and the forensic accountants tracing the funds, the money had simply evaporated. The paper trail ended at dead-end shell companies registered to non-existent people in tax havens that refused to cooperate with international investigators. The intelligence agencies were completely baffled. They were looking for a sophisticated, state-sponsored cyber syndicate. They were looking for foreign intelligence operations designed to destabilize Western banking. They never suspected that a single man, sitting in a luxury penthouse overlooking the Mediterranean, was pulling every single string with nothing more than a laptop and an unmatched understanding of human vulnerability. He watched their public press conferences on his security monitors, laughing silently at how they chased ghosts while he enjoyed the ultimate luxury in plain sight. But the digital world has one major flaw. It is perfectly logical. It leaves footprints. Every transaction on the blockchain, no matter how obscured, is recorded forever. And if you know where to look, even the most complex digital web can be unraveled. All it takes is a single, loose thread. If you pull hard enough, the entire tapestry begins to fall apart. For all his genius, the prince forgot a basic rule of survival. The physical world is messy. It is loud, it is unpredictable, and it is governed by physical needs. In late 2025, while living under an alias in a secure, heavily guarded compound, he ordered a highly specific, rare Italian espresso machine. It was a custom piece of machinery, the kind of luxury item that only a handful of people in the world would ever buy. He paid for it using an untraceable crypto wallet, routing the transaction through several layers of mixing services to ensure his anonymity. But he made one critical, fatal mistake. He entered his real delivery address. He thought his security was so absolute, his physical location so well hidden, that a simple delivery could never trace back to him. He believed he had constructed a perfect wall between his digital ghost and his physical body. A lone financial investigator tracking the movement of a small, seemingly insignificant crypto transaction noticed the purchase. The investigator had been staring at the massive, tangled web of transactions for over 2 years, looking for any pattern that departed from pure automation. The order for the custom espresso machine stood out like a beacon. The transaction was linked to a wallet that had touched the stolen central bank funds 18 months prior. The investigator didn't find a digital syndicate. He didn't find a shadow government. He found a physical delivery address in a secluded European coastal town. He spent weeks quietly cross-referencing shipping manifests, local utility bills, and satellite imagery, slowly tracing the true identity of the resident living inside the fortified estate. He discovered that the compound's massive power consumption matched the cooling requirements of a highly sophisticated personal server array. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. On a cold morning in 2026, the illusion shattered. Tactical units breached the compound, throwing flashbangs and storming the heavily fortified rooms. They didn't find an army of hackers. They found a single man, surrounded by high-end servers, luxury watches, a half-finished cup of espresso, and a blank, featureless passport template. There were no loaded weapons, no dramatic shootouts, and no spectacular escapes. The master con artist, who had spent years operating at the absolute pinnacle of global luxury, surrendered with a quiet, resigned nod. His digital empire, which had spanned across dozens of countries and manipulated some of the most powerful financial systems in the world, had been dismantled by his own desire for a perfect cup of coffee. The fake prince was arrested. His assets were frozen. But the story doesn't end with handcuffs. To this day, investigators have only recovered a fraction of the stolen money. Over $2 billion remains lost in the digital cloud, sitting in wallets that only he has the keys to. He lost his freedom, but he proved a terrifying reality. In the modern financial era, if you have the right look, the right words, and enough confidence, you can rob the world's most secure banks and make $3 billion disappear into thin air. He sits in a prison cell now, a man without a face, without a country, and without a crown. But somewhere in the vast, decentralized architecture of the internet, his billions are still waiting, silent, untouched, and completely invisible, serving as a permanent monument to the ultimate financial illusion.